Welcome everyone, and thank you for spending a couple of minutes with us today. My name is Se-Hsieng Eng. A little bit complicated, I have to give you that. I come from Singapore, and I've just moved 8 months ago to the UK. I have some bonds with Europe. I guess I studied in France, and my brother's been here for 7 years, recently graduated from Cambridge, and my family and kids are here with us now. So what are we here to talk about today? A little bit about how we connect things, a little bit about how we transform lives and businesses. But before we start, other than those I had the pleasure of meeting over dinner last night, how many of you think you use IoT at least as much as the examples we heard about earlier? Any show of hands? Okay, fantastic. All right, and just with us today in the room, we also have a couple of colleagues from Vodafone. So Rick Gunderson, you just want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
And Adam Gilbert, also from Vodafone IoT. So they're having meetings with a couple of you today, talk about examples in transport, utilities. It's quite an exciting time for us as we go through a transformation in the network to narrowband IoT and different types of end-to-end cases as well. So happy to hear from you at the end in regards with questions, etc. Right. So as part of the lead up to this discussion, I understood from the organizers that there was a question around what is IoT, what part does Vodafone actually deliver? Anyone want to give a guess in the room? Some of you probably already know. No? The comms, yeah.
What's the value chain beyond networking?
The value chain beyond networking, all right. Anyone from this part of the room? No? All right. So this is what we call the end-to-end value chain. And if you're just starting on that IoT journey, sometimes it's just useful to break it down into modules. Obviously, as we were speaking about earlier outside, you don't call someone and say, do you want to buy some IoT? You know, you don't go to the board and say, I think we should start doing some IoT. It might be quite a difficult thing to understand, although it always looks like, from a CIO perspective, everyone else in every other organization is doing it. But how do you really get your board started, and what is that business benefit? So we'll be bringing to life today for you some of the examples we've seen with our business customers. Some are small startups, some are large companies. And together with Vodafone, by delivering some parts of this value chain together, some with Vodafone, some with other partners, they've been really able to expand and take their operations to a whole new level. All right? So we actually have, within Vodafone IoT today, this work? Oops. No? Okay.
Picture a world where all kinds of products, from cars and home appliances to industrial wind turbines, can communicate about their status and usage in real time. Manufacturers have the power to detect and fix faults with these products before the user ever even notices the problem. Or how about a world where healthcare can happen in the home instead of the hospital? It's now possible for doctors to monitor patients around the clock and deliver care remotely, freeing up beds and enabling those with chronic conditions to live a more normal life. Or imagine a world in which everything around us, from buildings and bridges to roads and railways, can sense and respond to changing events. Smart cities have the potential to help governments and the private sector tackle society's biggest problems, including congestion, pollution, and crime. Why stop there? Tracking assets across continents, transforming retail cabinets into intelligent objects, and taking control of energy use. These are just a few of the smart services that the Internet of Things is enabling. The IoT is already transforming industries around the world, giving visionary companies the information and insight they need to save money, reduce risk, and better serve their customers. But more than that, it's opening up radical opportunities to innovate entirely new business models and product categories, enabling the as-a-service economy. When everything is connected, the possibilities are endless. For 25 years, Vodafone has been helping industry leaders bring their boldest ideas to life, including companies like Porsche, BMW, npower, and Amazon. With our unmatched capabilities, experience, and global reach, we can help you take advantage of all that the Internet of Things has to offer too. So what are you waiting for? Let's transform lives and business.
Thank you. So if we go to the next slide, we're just going to go through a couple of stats. But as I put that on the board, they have some numbers, they look quite impressive, but we're all among C-suite today. So let me just ask, how many of you are actually in what we would consider a B2B business? So you're in a business of selling something, a service, a product to another business. Does this make sense? Okay, about half of the room, 60%. And how many of you are in the business of doing something B2C? Okay, perfect. All right. Now, some of the examples we'll be stepping through today will be applicable in both scenarios. And what's really interesting now in the next phase of IoT is we're also seeing demand from organizations that go from B to B2C. So when you think about data monetization, it kind of splits up to an area where some of us want to be using that connectivity for a public or data domain, and we're fine with that. And some of it, we really want to stay private. How do we monetize that? Is that useful information for the company? Is an analytics engine that needs to go together with that? What's the cloud technology that enables that connectivity beyond the platform into the value chain? So just some of the questions to kind of put out there. Coming back to this slide, the Vodafone IoT journey started about 7 years ago. We had a platform in Netherlands that we started to scale. It's one of the internal innovations in a small company, a small part of the company within a large organization that thankfully wasn't shut down by the board too early. Now, we focused on our core strength, which many of you know as connectivity, which obviously has become somewhat commoditized over the years, but we're still very proud of the origins of that because it's allowed us to kind of provide always-on access. So when you think about IoT, is that Wi-Fi IoT? Is that satellite IoT? Is that mobile IoT? How does that move? Can you go underground? We can do most of that, and we now have access through satellite as well. So again, just thinking of where the things you might need in your business to get connected to give you the most productivity gain. We have 1,400 people in our organization globally. And I think a key point to note that maybe doesn't come out on this slide itself is we're not constrained by the Vodafone network. So within the UK especially, you think of Vodafone UK as very much a consumer brand. You think of it as something that you may or may not get coverage on the M4 sometimes. It all depends. But we actually have national and international roaming across all networks. And therefore, we've been particularly successful in industries like automotive industries, not just in the traditional connected car or telematics with your BMWs and your Jaguar Land Rovers, but also everything around the driving experience, the insurance, such as Admiral, etc. Does that make sense? Yeah? Any questions on this slide right now? Vittorio Colau, our group CEO in our recent half-year earnings, where the guidance was increased, has started to speak more and more about IoT. So how many of you are familiar that we've just launched our consumer IoT offering, V by Vodafone? Okay. Dare I ask if you are a customer yet?
No, not yet.
Right.
I've seen it in the papers. I saw it launched.
Fantastic. Now that is a brilliant example of how we're going B2C in a slightly non-traditional way. So now carrying it across our retail footprint globally. However, it's largely leveraging off the same enterprise IoT platform and the offerings and the strengths that we've built in the industry, if that makes sense. We then reported that we have roughly 800 million of revenues around the Vodafone Enterprise IoT offering globally in 6 regions, Northern Europe being one of them. And that's pretty substantial. So we are not really considered kind of a small startup right now, and hopefully we can share some of that experience with you. All right? Okay. So I think this slide, honestly, for most of the audience here, I think today will be something that's fairly straightforward. Again, conversation starters, happy to talk more about how we can help with that in terms of the business case to your board. I'm sure with some of the profiles I've seen today, we should be getting a lot more focus from the one-to-one sessions. So we'll be at the stand outside in terms of what's that business case you're really trying to solve. What are the two things, maybe, if you think about it in your business, that would really benefit from being able to speak to each other? And if those things were speaking, what would they be saying to each other to generate efficiency, savings, etc.? Sometimes, rather than look at all this jargon on this slide, it's easy to just think about the Internet of Things in that way. Then we can start talking about what's the best in breed application, what's the alarm response center you need, something from. Is it a security issue? Is it something you're trying to resolve because there's no other way you can reach that device or that issue? Does this make sense? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to try. Very good. Now, we interview a number of C-levels across the world every year for the past 5 years, I believe. How many of you have heard of the Vodafone Barometer? Yeah, excellent. So we have some copies. I'm asked to hold them up in the new brand. Anyway, I'm going to just go through a couple of kind of findings that we thought were quite interesting. Oh, thank you. Right. Now, the interesting thing is these numbers have shown a steady increase over the past couple of years. Certainly, I've been in Vodafone for 6 years, largely working out of the global part of the organization in Asia. And we've not seen as much interest in this area of the domain that Vodafone offers in the past couple of years. If you look at 85% believe, now what does believe really mean? Are they really able to translate that into action, or is there just a data connection somewhere in the network? Do they really understand what they could use to drive around business benefits? That's the next stat around ROI. And then if you look at IoT usage has grown, what does that really mean? How many of you feel IoT usage has grown in your organization in the last 12 months? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, good. And there are lots of interesting stats in there around digital transformation. Is security a myth? Is it really we should be have an overriding concern about? So really encourage you to pick up a copy and read more about that, all right? Okay, thank you. I'm going to just say next, I think. It's probably easier. This is a video about a little company in Bolton.
Screen was started over 20 years ago by a bunch of northern guys. We produce the most advanced screens in the world that allow our customers to deliver the right content to the right people at the right time. Connectivity is not just about putting content onto screens, it's also about knowing that the screens are working correctly. Screen uptime is key to our business, and if there is downtime, then we need to resolve it quickly. We've monitored over 250 data points, temperatures, fan speeds, humidity. We monitor the screen, the backlight. We get early warnings of potential problems. A fault condition arises, it sends an alarm to our RDM system, which provides a top-level summary to our support team. If they're not able to fix the problem remotely, then we can raise a trouble ticket, request a maintenance visit, and what the replacement assembly is required. This is all done over the Vodafone network so that we've got constant communication, knowing that our screens are operating on a 24/7 basis. I like to describe Vodafone as providing the bit in the middle between our remote screens and central management system, a modem that sits within the remote screen that roams onto a mobile network and delivers data reliably to our central systems. We agree a specific level of screen uptime for our customers. I'm pleased to say that we consistently meet and exceed those expectations. Vodafone has got the global infrastructure, coverage and quality of service that we require. It's a truly scalable IoT solution. So I think when Lord Sugar first
discovered, this little company called M-Screen in Bolton. It was pitching itself out there as an IoT company or machine-to-machine company, which was the old name for the industry, right? And what they really found was actually their strength was in delivering a value to a particular industry and doing that really well. It wasn't necessarily branding themselves as everything generic, machine-to-machine. And the transformation this company has gone through in the last 5 years is really exceptional. JC Deco, I'm sure, has picked up on it. And they're starting conversations with Clear Channel, so I hear. So what they've been able to do really is to not just do what you see in the video around uptime, etc. at Vodafone, but they spoke to us about how they could be deploying a JC Deco or eventually a Clear Channel engineer who didn't need to be very trained in the ins and outs of the screen. Because before they were sending that engineer out, they could already tell the engineer exactly what module that was down. And what that translated back into was essentially what you get around uptime, which counts into revenue and profits for advertisers, but also facial recognition on the screen. So you may not realize it, but whether you are male or female staring at that screen, that ad may change. And then they then found out that using the same reliability, they could transform both sides of the screen to be revenue generating, again, very much at the same cost. So if you think about it in those ways, what's gone from just the comms module and what that could allow them to generate in terms of business insight is actually quite an interesting journey. So happy to speak more about that as well. We're just going to flip through the next couple, which is Kone. So Kone is more in the elevators. I'm sure many of you Kone, ThyssenKrupp, anyone in this industry? This is a lot around what we do for predictive maintenance. So we've had quite a lot of success with large customers such as Hitachi, which Adam can speak about, in transport, rail, infrastructure, anything to do around understanding when and how things might break before they actually do is, I'm sure, something many of you spend time about in your daily jobs. If we move on. Domino's, anyone from Domino's here? I saw a couple of names. So this is quite a new logo for us. And essentially, we've empowered all of the Domino UK. Yeah, and Domino's are actually owned by Bain, but all the Domino's UK 22,000 delivery riders will now be given a mobile device that is ruggedized and locked down for Domino's only to be able to track how long it actually gets you that pizza from the oven to the door. And I understand that now allows them to put a customer satisfaction or a monetary guarantee around that. So hope that you'll try that soon. Couple more, I think, before we move on to questions. So I encourage you to put your thinking hats on. Polar Crush. Anyone familiar with Polar Crush? Has kids who like the slush machines? So they, in the UK, were actually having the liquids stolen from their machines. So the sweet syrup that goes into the machines, the retailers were putting out there in the off licenses or in the 7-Elevens, and then starting to swap out the liquids for something else when they came down, or stealing the machines to go and blend something else. I'm seeing a lot of wide eyes now in the room thinking, is this possible? Well, putting in a connected cabinet for this and also for brands like Coca-Cola allows the manufacturer to actually control the brand, realize the temperature, and ensure that the experience that your customer, your consumer gets from the product is consistent. So that's been quite an interesting B2C example. Next, and I think one of the more interesting ones. Anyone knows Exobionics? Yes? No? So they're an American company that help people walk again. And as all of us with children know, you don't help people walk by telling them that they need to walk. You actually show them, but you let them discover it and learn on their own. With the sensors that EXO has built in from Vodafone in the offering, the therapist, who in this picture is standing behind the patient, is able to regulate the amount of help the person is actually receiving from the prosthetic limb. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think many of you today are probably at this stage of innovation within your own company, small or large. We spoke about it last night at our table. Can Vodafone help you? Hopefully this at least gives you some starting conversations to have. We may not be the end-to-end solution, except in certain verticals where we're very, very strong in, but we do have an ecosystem of partners that we can link you up with that hopefully will be interesting for us to have further conversations today. All right. Now, on that, if I end on the last slide and maybe invite us for some questions.
questions from the floor? I'll get us started then.
Fantastic.
Just a brief one from us. We were talking about big data at one of the roundtables last night and making that meaningful. You spoke about about the need for focus and outcomes, but what are you actually trying to achieve? How are you helping your customers understand the data that your IoT devices are actually pulling back out for them? What's the interaction about how they're going to make that meaningful for the business?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways, and I guess over the years we've accumulated more and more data. We've also realized that some of our customers who have always had access to this data haven't necessarily been using it. So I'll give an example, and then I'll go on to some of the big and sexy stuff maybe that the audience is more interested in. So I went into a customer recently that uses Vodafone to try out pharmaceutical new drugs all over the world. And to do that, they want a lockdown device with hopefully a 20-year shelf life, which is near impossible, but let's put that aside for a minute, that they have to guarantee to their pharma customers like your GSKs, your Glaxos, and your AstraZenecas that data will never be breached, right? And they were finding that they were just buying Vodafone IoT connectivity, the SIMs, and shipping them out, and over years, they've accumulated close to 200,000. It's a small startup in Finland, reverse acquired by US, now private equity owned by Rothschild, and has now set up their headquarters in Hammersmith. Now, you then realize that actually through the years, we've built in analytics like portals to allow you self-management, to allow you to manage that estate, such as what mScreen are actively doing, but they haven't been doing that. So I think sometimes when you think about big data, think as well about the data that you already have in your ecosystem, and are you thinking about how you're using that smartly today to drive business decisions? The good thing is we've become a lot closer between the two companies as we show them how that actually can show them where stock is going, which customers or patients are actually responding to trials, etc. That was something they hadn't realized because they had grown so quickly as an organic company. Within Vodafone, in the core platform itself, we obviously have a lot of data, and with our cloud colleagues, we are looking now at building in analytics. So how many of you have actively started to look at data analytics in your own companies? Perfect. And how many of you are building your own? So the rest are outsourcing it, largely speaking, if we say that. Yeah, more nods. Yeah. So we're definitely looking at bringing in that ecosystem of partners, some of whom have been using the Vodafone IoT capability anyway, to come in and build that analytics capability for us in what we would call a much more future forward looking way.
Excellent. Any other questions from the floor?
Is it an incredibly expensive? Is it an
Tim.
incredibly expensive thing to get into? So I haven't got in my existing company a particular IoT burning platform, but in future companies, is this something that is relatively easy to get into?
Do you want to answer that?
Yes.
A bit more.
So typically you'd be looking at, if we went back to the second slide that Se-Hsieng showed, thank you.
So my answer was yes to that, and I was going to say that typically if you look back to that second slide that Se-Hsieng showed, you've got the hardware, so you need to invest in hardware if you're going to connect that to your asset, your remote asset. The hardware can be a few €100, so we're talking fairly cheap hardware, and that can be for quite high quality, ruggedized 2G, 3G, 4G equipment that can be plugged into your asset. You've then got the connectivity, and we've already said that connectivity is becoming commoditized. And a machine that's generating maybe a gig a month, you're still only looking in the in the low tens of euros per month for that. You've then got the platform that you need to invest in. If we're providing the platform, typically that's in the euros per month for us to be able to host the application, host the data for you to be able to retrieve it. So it is a very affordable solution. We would generally start, if we're providing the entire ecosystem, in the dozens of units. If we're providing connectivity only, we would generally think that it becomes feasible around about 500 to 1,000 connections over the life cycle. Did that answer the question?
It did.
Good. Okay.
Good.
You had a question there, sir?
Oh yeah, it was just a smaller. I presume you've got quite a flexible model where we can buy unbundled stuff. So instead of buying an analytics platform where you tell us how hospitality and restaurants work, you can just dump the data into our repository and we can play with it and stuff.
Yes, and I think we're finding that most customers today prefer that as well, because you probably want to run that on your own and match that with your CRMs, etc. That's what we found anyway.
And do you also, sorry, I'm going to carry on.
Go for it.
And do you already, so you showed a fridge opening and whether the sensor's actually sort of noticing that a fridge door has been opened. Does the Vodafone actually provide all that kind of functionality as well? So there is, we've got a suite of things that we can monitor, so vibrations, we can do vibration analysis, and you're not just buying comms, you're buying the sensors as well. So
I have managed to start you from the beginning about just comms, a little bit further up the value chain, I'm hearing from that, which is good. So we would need to go into in-depth discussions on that. We don't have, if you walk into a Vodafone shop or have a conversation with it, we don't have a plethora of sensors, platform, underground, etc. to sense everything out there. That's not where Vodafone's key strength is. But in certain industries, so for example, Admiral, which is an insurance company, I suppose everyone's familiar with here, they do use our technology, and it's all our technology, to sense whether your young teen may be keeping his eyes on the road, and then looking at usage-based insurance and modulating those premiums. The example you saw at Polar Crush is absolutely all Vodafone. We worked with a Greek company that we then acquired in Vodafone Greece, which were actually using a company in Milton Keynes here to do some of the hardware, which actually were just producing a temperature sensor, but was never a smart temperature sensor. Does that make sense? So for certain industries, we have gone a lot further because we've seen that there has been really demand.
Well, it's been a fascinating look at some of the genuine use cases. I guess some of the human outcomes there, particularly the last one in terms of the medical side, and what a profound impact that could have on humans, as opposed to just making our lives and our working environment better, is particularly wonderful to see. I know the Vodafone guys are obviously outside and here. I'm happy to pick up any further questions or any other details that you have. So in the meantime, please join me in thanking Se-Hsieng.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you all.